Katherine Artines. Thank you for joining me for this short video as we go over some of the advanced features in Perfect Embroidery Pro software. We'll be comparing digitized fonts to TrueType fonts and how to solve some of the issues that arise with TrueType text. I consider this information to be for intermediate to advanced users. I've done previous webinars on digitized text and TrueType text, and they contain a generous amount of basic information about text, fonts, typeface, kerning, leading, the text editing tool, and the like. I would recommend you take a look at those if you're new to working with the text features in Perfect Embroidery Pro. You'll see that I'm working with Windows 10 on a PC, not a Mac. Perfect Embroidery Pro software is Windows-based only, as is all of the Inspiration software. This video springs from the request by Vicky D in the community's Hot Topics. Also, under PEP, Robin S had a question about the overlap on the letter S in a Diana VS font. Even though that question was about 4 months ago and answered nicely by Chris L., I know we are visual people, so I'll show you how to fix a situation like that later in this presentation. This video will assume you are comfortable with digitized text and TrueType text and take a deeper look at some of the issues common to TrueType text and those questions asked on the DIME community. Having said that, though, we'll do a smidgen of review. To work with digitized scalable fonts, use the text tool, first one on the toolbar. Having clicked on that, we come to the screen and click once. We see a text box here. We're going to come over to the right side of your screen under Properties Text, and it is in this white text box that we type whatever it is that we'd like to see. And it will appear in the last font that was used. Here we have our first text box, and we can come in. You notice all of these symbols, black diamonds, blue triangles, and such. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see better. If I take one of the two-headed blue triangles and move to the right, you can see that anything to the right of that blue triangle was moved. I'll go ahead and do an undo. If I take my black triangle, I have selected just that letter, and now I can play with just that letter. I could size it, come up here to my pink rotate button, and so forth. And we could continue to do other things with this text box. Why might you want to work with those types of things? Let's take a quick peek at some of the words that I've brought in from those previous webinars, and you can see when you have the ability to size individual letters, rotate them, and so forth, you can do a lot of fun things with your characters. By digitized scalable fonts, we mean that the letters were all digitized individually with pull-push considered to give us letters of all of the same height when they are stitched out. Here, I borrowed this particular slide from Eric Campbell, where he has illustrated quite lovely the idea of pull and push. You see here that Eric has indicated what we're talking about digitized words, that there's all kinds of distortion on the letters, and here the E is slightly below the baseline, the S as well, but because of all of that push-pull, when those letters stitch out, they will all stitch out the same height. Let's come back into PEP and we'll play a little bit. You notice here that the word is still with the pink box, and that is because we are still in the text edit. If I want to work with the text just as a normal object, I'm going to use my select key. We see our normal black box with our black handles, and now I can pick it up and move it around as I would any object. We're going to take this and come over to our font properties and change the font. We have two different ways that we can do that. If at first we come to our drop-down arrow, I can use that and see all of the fonts that are available here in Perfect Embroidery Pro. There's 240 of them. If I knew the name of the font that I'd want, I certainly could click on that. If I'm not sure of the look I'm after, I can bring my mouse right up here to the catalog window. I'll click once to remove the bar. If I rest on that window, I see all of the characters that are available with the special symbols and so forth. If I click on the window, I'm brought into the full font catalog where we can actually see those fonts. This is generally the way I do it. I might not know at that moment the look I'm after, so I can come in here and again see it visually. We're going to come up here, scroll up, and find Arial. I can double click it, or I could have clicked it once and OK. Come back up here to our zoom, come out just a little bit, and I like to work with the 3D on, so we'll leave it like that. Here we are in the Arial text. I'm going to do a copy, paste, right click on red, and drag the red one down because we're going to make some comparisons between the two types of Arial font that we can use in our properties text box. Again, the blue one is set for our text digitized Arial. The red one, we'll select it, come back over here, and do you notice that we have this TT checkbox? TT stands for true type. I'm going to put the check mark in that, and then it's going to give me a completely different list of fonts. Here, I'll use the drop-down arrow, and what you see are all of the true type fonts available to you on your computer. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm now going to scroll down until I find Arial and then do an apply. And now if you take a look, those two words, same word, same Arial font, but they look different. Can you tell how the red Kate is thinner than the blue Kate? This is what we're doing in today's video. We are going to look at the differences between your options. Here we have the two words in true type font. Once again, the blue is done in our digitized font and the red is done in the true type. Let's do some comparing between these two. Visually, the width is different, and if we come over to sequence, we can see on the red that the stitch count is slightly less than the blue, which would make sense because of the width difference. But if we were to come up to properties and we went under our density, that would be the same, and our type certainly is still the same. If we look at underlay, the parallel and center line are chosen for the blue. If I pick the red and go back under underlay, I see the same two chosen. So the majority of the properties are the same. Let's take a moment and zoom in on these two names and talk just a moment about our underlay. It is important when we are working with text. I'm going to come over and turn off my 3D. I think you can see it easier in our comparison. All of those zigzag stitches under there and so forth, that is what you're seeing here too on the red. That is the underlay. Underlay is usually the first stitching and gives a framework for your embroidery, much like our bones do for our body. We don't see them, but they are doing a very tremendous job. It both supports the embroidery stitches and attaches the stabilizer to the fabric, which reduces our fabric shifting. I'm going to select the blue, come back under underlay, and let's take off the parallel and go ahead and apply. Do you see the difference? We no longer see that zigzag stitch. If I took off the center line as well and do apply, I have no underlay. And that is not what we want to do. But visually, I want to show you what's actually happening under there. All right, we'll play with some of the others. Let's try perpendicular, and it gives us a check mark, but when we go to apply, notice that it won't allow us to do that. That's very nice about the software. It won't let us do something that we shouldn't be doing. If we do a zigzag, we see that it is applied to our word, and we have that double zigzag, almost twice what we saw in parallel. So you could continue to come over here and play with the other types of underlay and see if they are appropriate, and also if the software will let us do that. You saw the lattice was not allowed, the full lattice not, and neither is the edge traveled. So our choices are the ones that are appropriate for these characters. Parallel, center line, or we could choose to do the zigzag, which gives double the parallel. I'll go ahead and apply so that we do have some underlay. Not every area of a letter will have the same underlay, but every area should have some. I'll give you additional information about underlay in an upcoming video. We're going to back out just a bit, and maybe even a little bit more. I'll come to a 300. I will turn back on my 3D, and I'd like to give you a trick while we're talking about underlay. If you find you need more underlay than any of these options give you, specifically on a very textured fabric or high nap, here's the trick. We have our Kate chosen. It is the digitized Arial. I'm going to do a copy, paste, and I'll turn that one orange with a right click. Come up here to our order. I'm going to move it to back. So the orange is behind our blue, and it's going to act as our fuller underlay. Here's our trick. With orange selected, let's go into our Properties Fill, and we're going to change the density very high to be a 1.5. Remember, the higher the number, the less dense that is. You can see right here with this visual. Now, the orange is behind it, the blue on top. We could even choose our blue and go into our fill and decrease our density. In other words, put more threads in that same area and apply. Let's come over here to our sequence view and click on our eyeball. In other words, we're hiding the blue. Can you see now the orange at the density 1.5 gives us more underlay than did our parallel? So this might be appropriate for the project you are working with. Now here we've used different colors for the underlay and the letter, but in reality underlay should be the same color as your letter or the same color as the base fabric. It should not be seen. Let's do another trick. We'll come back out just a little bit, and we're going to take a look at the width. I'll come over here. I am going to select that orange and delete it. So we're back to just our blue, that is our Arial digitized, and our red, which is our true type. Here's another trick. If ever we need letters wider than they are, perhaps if no bold was available on the font chosen, we're going to use Push-Pull to add a little bit of width. What is Push-Pull? We'll come into our slide and take a look at this picture from Eric Campbell. It is the strain resulting from a number of stitches going from side to side, or the width of the column, as we see here. This is called pull, and also affects the height or length of the object, as we see here in a push. Pull distortion happens in every stitch, just by the very nature of the procedure. The stitch is formed, and as it pulls tight, it means that it shortens slightly. With a large number of stitches or with high speeds during embroidery, it could cause distortion in the shapes or areas, causing outlines to not land or stitch where they should. This is sometimes referred to as the registration being off. Sometimes it leaves gaps between neighboring areas. This is a very basic definition. Again, I'm going to be covering push-pull compensation in an upcoming video. Let's take a look at the trick. We have Kate. We're going to come in here to our properties, and we are interested in the pull-push. You see the defaults set. We have the defaults for pull and for push. It is the width that we're interested in, so we're going to deal with pull. I'm going to leave absolute as the type, but you'll notice there's 0 measurement, so I'll come for this area right here and type in a 0.4. Go ahead and apply. And do you see how the red Kate now looks almost as thick as the blue one? Before we leave digitized fonts, remember that we also have 10 digitized mini fonts when a small letter is needed. Here you can see the comparisons. If we have the normal Arial at a 20 millimeter default size, we can also choose a mini font that is 6 millimeter, 4 millimeter, or 3 millimeter. 3 being very, very small. But these again are digitized fonts, which means every single letter in the alphabet has been individually digitized so that it works at any of these particular sizes. Something else to remember whenever you use a mini font is to be sure to use a 60 weight thread and a size 9/65 needle. Now let's review a bit for TrueType text. First of all, we must remember that the TrueType digital font technology was created for computer screens and printing. If we do remember this, we'll be less flustered when we add thread to these fonts and we get less than lovely results. This slide shows us print versus thread. On the left, you see the TrueType fonts printed as they were meant to be, with the different point sizes shown also. Those same fonts were done in thread, as you can see over in the right column, and some of them look okay and some of them don't. And this is what we have to remember when we're working with our TrueType fonts. They were originally designed for computer screen and printing. You may be tempted to use the fun, thin TrueType fonts, but again, you must ask yourself what's going to happen when I try to create this look with thread on different kinds of fabric, adding stabilizer and needles, and you see that you must bring logic to your project. On a clean screen, let's go get our other way to work with TrueType fonts. We'll come up here to File, come down to Import TrueType Text. Our box comes up and I'm going to type in the word desired. I can use these ellipse and go through and take a look at all of the fonts that are available to me in my list. Remember, the list of fonts you have comes from your operating system on your computer with any additional font collections you may have downloaded or any other software that you have added. I'm going to scroll down and pick just one of the easy ones to work with, Britannic. Again, remember your list might be different than mine. And here we have the options of bold or bold oblique. Oblique meaning very much like italics. I'll go ahead and OK here and OK here, and we come in with the word outlined. First thing I want to do is to group that, and then I'll come over here to artwork and change my height to 1 inch so we can see it just a little bit better. One of the main differences when using import TrueType text is the fact that this text comes in as true artwork. If I do a right click and I come down to convert to, I see all of the options that are available to me for this word. We'll try a couple so that we can just run through and refresh ourselves. Yes, we can make it be a run, a right click, convert to. Yes, I can make it be a satin, right click, convert to, and I could come to complex fill. And I'll show one that would not really be appropriate, but we're still allowed to do that, and that's to turn any of our TrueType text to applique. Here, because of the insides and so forth of the letters, this really isn't appropriate. I'll go ahead and undo that. Previously, we compared the text Arial to the text TrueType Arial, and at this point we're going to throw our import TrueType text into the mix. We'll go ahead and bring up this document, turn on my 3D so that we can see it. Let's back up just a little bit here so that you can see what I have. When I created this document, we have the same blue and red that we were playing with before. You can see that the increased pull push has not been added to this one. And then I did the same thing. We went under File, TrueType Text. I typed in my word and left it right here in Arial. This is how I got those two on the screen, copy pasted the second one. Because now we're going to do a little bit more comparison with those first two that are Arial and then our import TrueType text that is Arial. So let's come up here, we'll increase this just a bit for our zoom. Let us select our purple, do a right click, convert to Satin. We now have 3 different Arial fonts, all 3 created differently, and really they all 3 are different. To prove that, let's take our purple and drag it over and drop it on our red. Remember, the red is the one that we did with the true type here. I'm going to select both my red and my purple, come up to our center line so that I know I have those resting on each other correctly, and then let's come in and do a zoom. And if I zoom very far into this letter A with all of its curves, you can see that these two are not the same. The purple stretches out a little bit on the left and comes out more on the inside of the curve. If we scoot down just a little bit, you can see even more of that difference here in the curves and even on the T's, the straightness of the T's and so forth. Not so bad on that column there, but a little different on the width. We'll come back out, and this was to show you that they're not the same. Here's our number one point to remember. I'll go ahead and select my purple and drag her back up at the top. Text, true type, which is the red that we did with the text box, and we simply changed the check mark for the true type text. And the purple is our file import true type text Arial, are not necessarily the same size. Again, that's what this video is about, to show you what options are available and how they might differ, and therefore you can make a logical choice for your project. Let's try our next option that we have. So we're going to right click, convert to complex fill. You may remember that up here in our complex fill under patterns, the default is Tatami. Let's do a drop down, and we have another Satin. We'll apply. So technically all four of these are Arial fonts and they all have satin stitch in them, but you can see how they are different. If we just compare our purple and green, both of these done with our import true type text. Here our purple, we did that convert to satin, and you notice that the satin is following the shape of the letters. I'll zoom in just a little bit here. We'll go up to 300 and see if that's helpful for you. Whoop, go up to 400 and see if that's helpful. And as I scoot over, you can see that in our satin, the satin stitch actually changes direction to follow the shape. This is because satin is laid down in a columnar effect. If we take a look at complex fill satin, which is the green, you can see that in this case the green is set down with the satin stitch being a vertical stitch no matter where it is in the letter, no matter the curves of each letter or angles. Also, we have a few more jump stitches in there. Can we alter this look? Yes, we can. If we take a look at purple, and again, I'm going to zoom in a little closer. We'll choose our shape tool. As I click on the purple, I can see that with our satin stitch, it is treated like columnar, and we have many angle lines in each of the shapes. Do you see those that are yellow going from the left to right in the column? And that's what's controlling the different angle of the stitch. If we take a look at our green, remember this is our complex fill satin, and we have our shape tool selected and we click on green. The difference here is that we only have one angle. Here we have the black dot at the top and the black dot at the bottom. And this one angle line is controlling the stitch, in this case vertical. Can I take that and move it? I certainly can. Come over here to apply, but notice that I've changed all of the angle stitching in the entire letter A. If I do a right click and come down to set the angle, I only have these options to choose. If I choose 45 and apply, all the stitching in that letter has changed. So when we work with a complex fill satin, we do not have the ability to add multiple angle lines in there. If we choose the T, more of a straight letter, I'll choose it with my angle, and I can right click anywhere, set that angle, and I'll do a 135 and apply. And again, I've changed the stitch and all the lettering. That might be enough for you to change the look of your satin. You might think that that is okay, and if it is, that's fine. So our second point to remember is that satin, as in the purple, fills an area like a column and it has many angles. The green, which was a complex fill satin, has a set angle which is applied to the entire area. Something else to keep in mind when we talk about artwork, remember the purple and the green, because they came in from the import true type text procedure, they are considered artwork, and we can right click, look at Convert To, and see all of the options that are available to us with true artwork. If we come over and click the red, back into our property screen where we have the true type check marked and satin is chosen, I can click on that and choose artwork and apply. It changes to filled artwork, but if we do a right click, Convert To, you see that we have limited options in this artwork that is under our text tool. Again, remember, we're looking at the options that Perfect Embroidery Pro gives us. Again, as a review, all four of these are our Arial font. Purple and green were done with a file import true type text. The blue and the red came off of our text tool, the blue being the digitized Arial and the red being our true type that we can access through our properties box. It may seem that you would always want the satin choice applied, but let's take a look at this next example. Scripts are very popular, and the one that people like a lot is our Edwardian script, but sometimes this gives us a little bit of issue. You can see in this file that I've already created, on the left side, this is our text tool with our true type chosen and Edwardian script. Again, just as a review, take a look over here. I'm in my properties text, and here I have the check mark in true type, and we have chosen the Edwardian script. Applied, you see that it is less than lovely. We have some satin stitches filled in the entire letter. If we come over and take a look at our red group, this was created with our file, import true type text, and then I've just typed a few of the letters so that I could compare, and I went in and got our Edwardian script in the list. Okay, and that's how I did it here. We'll go ahead and cancel since I already have it on the screen. And what I've done is to copy and paste that first box twice so that we can play with the options that we have. Let's choose our green group, do a right click, Convert To Satin. It's going to take just a moment here to render. And when it does, some of the letters are quite lovely and some have been ignored. And what's interesting, if we come over here to our sequence view and expand the green, you will see the letters that it did not convert are still considered artwork. We'll come back to those. We'll choose our purple and do our other option, right click, Convert To Complex Fill. We'll leave it at the tatami for right now, and you see that all of the letters have come in, so none of them gave us any difficulty. I'm going to do a copy, paste, change the color of those, we'll make it gold, and drag that group over to the side, because here I would like to compare the complex fill purple tatami. We're going to come over and make the gold, drop down for our pattern, and choose satin and apply. And we see that that too worked. It did not ignore any of the letters. Let's take a look at our green and see some of the options that you have for editing. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. We're going to select the Y and the Z, and I'll go ahead and do a copy paste and bring those over here so that we can see them. I'll turn them to blue and then separate them just a little bit, and we're going to take a look and see what can we do to encourage this letter to become this very pretty satin stitch as we have with our green. Selecting the blue, one of the tricks that you have is to come up to our transform. I'm going to bump up that height just a little bit with 1.25 and apply it. Then I'll go ahead and do a right click, convert to satin. Takes just a moment, but you can see by bumping it up just a little bit, it indeed filled in with a very pretty satin. Now, if I go back and size it to this green, let's say that I needed it to be a 1 inch, and that was as high as I could allow it to be. Let's come back to our transform, change that back to a 1 inch, and apply. And you can see that it did keep the satin stitch with that letter. Let's try the same thing with our Z. Select, change the height to a 1.25, apply, right click, convert to satin, and we wait, and it did not work. So I'll just go use that trick again and bump it up maybe to a 1.5. Apply, right click, convert to satin. And you can see at that height, it did apply the satin stitch. Once again though, I can't use it at 1.5. I need to come back to transform and change that size to a 1 and apply it, and it does keep the satin stitch with that letter. So that's one of your tricks that you can use, is to try to size the letter larger and see if it will then accept the satin stitch. It might not work on all the different fonts, but it's certainly a trick worth trying. Here's our next point. Sometimes we have to play with all of our options to get the desired look. Still working with this Edwardian script because it happens to be one of those scripts that people have difficulty with, but they like it because it's so pretty and fancy. So let's take another look at it. I have a document created for us, so we can just move on. Once again, the word house brought to us by the import TrueType text, and it is also in Edwardian script. I have copy-pasted it so that we can play with both of them. We'll go ahead and select our blue, right-click, convert to satin. All of the letters converted. However, if we take a closer look at this U and this S, it's not quite the look that we are after. Right? We'll go ahead and back out. Here, let's select our red word, come into our transform. I'm going to change the width just a little bit bigger to the 3.5 and apply. Now I'll go ahead and do right click, convert to satin. And that seems to have fixed the problem with the letter S, but not with the letter U. We'll come in on that and get a closer look and see what can we do to fix that issue. Once again, I'm going to come over to my shape tool and select our red U. Can you tell that it has given us a split line, the blue line that's right here from top to bottom, and that looks like the issue that is happening with this letter. Let's do a right click and ask it to delete that split line. Come over and do apply, and you see that that is what was needed to get rid of that situation on the letter U. Now again, we made this word a little larger. So what do we do if we can't go larger and we have to fix based on the size that we have? Let's come into our word house. I'll scroll, get the screen so you can see what we're doing here. Once again, I'm going to go into my shape tool. We'll do the same for our letter U that we just did. Here is the split line. Right click, delete that split line and apply, and we have fixed the letter U. But now we have to fix this letter S. And I'm going to zoom in even more so that you can see what we're doing here. This is the issue right here. the stitches have gone across this open area, and then it starts to turn to make the angle on that letter. We have a couple of things that we want to do here. First of all, we're going to deal with the split. See how the split goes from this point all the way over to this point. And that's not logical. That's not where we want this letter to split. So we're going to grab that green bar, drag it up just a little bit, and then I'll try to separate both of these two. It looks like I have it. And I'm simply dragging over so that that split line is across this narrow column. The other thing I'm going to do is pick up the other dot of this yellow bar and drag it over and drop it. That is an angle line. So our blue lines are split, the yellow are angle. I'm going to drag this down just a little bit further. I had it up so that you could see it. And the other thing we're going to do is create another one of these split lines up here where it's very close to the point. Where that pink is, we're trying to make that its own column. So I'll come up here, right click. This time I want to add a split line. Click on one side, drag over and release, and you see that I have the split here and down here. The other things that are not really working for us are these yellow angle lines. We'll click and drag that one so that it is just across this column. I'll come over and get this dot and drag it so that it is only across this column. We'll go ahead and apply, and you see that that's indeed what we needed to do to fix this problem. So none of that was difficult. It's just your understanding of the tools that we have. We've played with the split line before in previous videos and webinars. We've also done the angle line in others. But here we have an issue with a letter, so we're going to get some tools that we're already comfortable with and see if that will help with the difficulty. We'll go ahead and scroll back out, and we see that yes indeed, now we have the word house at its original size, and we have fixed both of the letters U and S. This is a good example of your having to decide how much of your time is worth fixing the letters for the font that you have chosen. You could try a different font. If we came back to our Edwardian script and I selected the blue grouping, instead of using a true type Edwardian script, let's remove that true type, click on our catalog window, and I'm going to go down to that Diana VS font, a double click, and it applies, and you can see that it is a very lovely script. Which brings us to Robin's question from the community. Let's go into a clean screen. She had her question about the capital letter S. I'll get our text tool, click on our screen, come over here to our text box, and type in the letter S. Happens to be the font that we want with our Diane VS. Go ahead and apply, and here is our letter. With it selected, I'm going to turn on our 3D, and let's zoom in quite a bit so that you can see her issue was that she didn't like the way it caused a blob, which is her word, at the crossover right in here. Is there a way to remove the overlap? Once again, Chris L. gave her a great answer, and here is that answer visually. With our select key and a right click, we do not have the option to remove overlap, and you don't on Digitized Fonts. What we can do is zoom in even a little bit closer so that you can see what we've got to work with. I'm going to come down and turn off the 3D so that we see the individual stitches, and now we'll come down to our fourth button, which is our stitch tool, and make that selection. As I come over to my stitches, if I rest anywhere on that thread, I then see my stitch points. I'm going to right click, delete stitch, right click, delete stitch, right click, delete stitch, and so forth until I have removed the stitches I no longer want. I can also hit the delete key. Once you've activated that delete, I can hit delete on the keyboard and delete any remaining stitches that I'd like to do. What we don't really want to do is to remove too many of them. I can go ahead and remove this one, but I want to leave this one here. We want to leave enough stitches that are still under this crossover satin stitch. And I can, if I choose, move that down more to the middle so it'll give me a nice cross stitch. Should I think I need to, I can move that stitch over just a hair so that they are more within this column. Now we'll do our 3D back on, and the other thing to remember about that trick is make sure you're removing the correct stitches. We did it on the underneath stitches, which is what you want. You don't want to remove any of these crossovers on top. We'll have some funky looking stitches there that go across that satin. So do remember to remove the proper layer. Point number 4, remember, let's use all of our tools. We'll go ahead and zoom back out. The more we learn and play with how the tools work, we bring that knowledge to any issue that we might have, whether it's text or shape or filled area. We used the shape tool option for split area and angle line on our word house, and here we use the stitch tool to remove stitches under an area where remove overlap was not available. Here's a chart I made for that May 2015 webinar that shows the differences between text true type and import true type text. And you can see that there are some things we can do with the import true type text because it is true artwork. But there are other things that we can do when we create with the text tool. Some last thoughts about our true type text. I know some of you with businesses must match letters and fonts exactly, so we look for those true type fonts online. If you purchase a font set or find a free site like 1001 Free Fonts, many of those font collections download and work nicely. However, if you find you're having a problem, it may be that even though the font is indicated as a true type font, it might not really be genuine. It's very easy to create true type fonts by converting them from PostScript or other font technologies, but it's also very easy to do a bad job. In this video, we've seen some of the issues with very thin fonts, so make wise choices when you do download new fonts. For example, which of these would be appropriate with thread? I'm not so sure. I would choose the middle two. Not just digitizing is important when embroidering letters. Think too of the actual embroidery process. When using satin stitch fonts, use a soluble stabilizer or be very careful when removing a tearaway or cutaway stabilizer. Most of the time with satin stitch letters, I use a film topper such as Solvay as shown here. Fabric, stabilizer, thread weight, needle size, font choice, and size of letters all play a very important part in your being successful with your text. In conclusion, you have choices. Whether you use a digitized font or a true type font, you should now be more comfortable with the editing options available. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy!